Hello and welcome to Diecast Restos for a Tomaso doubleheader. This Pantera model was entered at 8G in the Superfast Matchbox range, lasting from 1975 until 1982. All except the 1982 release were painted white with a blue base. The 1982 model was a US only casting, painted in blue with a black base. These had white and black stripes and number 17 tampos. The stickers that went on my two examples had long gone, with only a bit of residue remaining. Here's how it should look with number 8 Pantera markings. And this is the vehicle it is based on, a Tomaso Pantera in a gorgeous shade of yellow. The Pantera replaced the 8F Wildcat dragster in 1975, as Lesney returned to a slightly less wacky model design. That said, the Pantera has a very aggressive stance, what with its larger set of rear wheels. But there isn't too much to report on the casting itself, as it went unchanged for so long. As a result, there are no real rarities or valuable variations. Some can be found with the sun stickers from the 47D Beach Hopper, or missing either the side or bonnet stickers entirely. One of my castings had been crushed a little over the driver's side window that I have to tease back into shape. But otherwise, the casting's only other outing was in 1986 for the Super GT series, where it could be found painted a few different colours, without an interior, and with black windows. Tomaso are an Italian sports and luxury vehicle manufacturer. They are one of the many from the Emilia-Romagna province of Modena, alongside Lamborghini, Maserati, Pagani and of course Ferrari. Alejandro Tomaso founded the company in 1959, originally to produce racing cars and prototypes. Tomaso himself was from a prominent Argentine family, and in 1955 fled the country after being implicated in a plot to overthrow President Juan Perón. His Argentine background is visible in the Tomaso logo. He began racing in Formula 1 in 1957, driving for Modena-based privateer team Scuderia Centro Sud. Tomaso developed chassis that were used in Formula 1 between 1961 and 1963. They were later used by Frank Williams' F1 team in 1970, though to no success with 0 finishes from 12 races in total. Tomaso's attention was then turned to road cars in 1964 with the Vallelunga, named after the Italian race circuit. 59 of these were built up until 1967. Initially they were fitted with bodywork by Carrozzeria Fisore, but in 1965, after 15 bodies had been built, production moved to Ghia. The Vallelunga used the 1.5 litre 4-cylinder as used in the Ford Cortina. From 1967, the company built the Mangusta, Italian for mongoose. Apparently, it was so named as mongooses are cobra killers, and there had been a failed deal between Tomaso and Carroll Shelby. The Mangusta again used Ford power, this time either the 289 or 302 V8. It was designed by Giorgetto Giugiaro at Ghia. 401 of them were made until 1971. Until this, the Pantera came along. Unsurprisingly Italian for panther, the Pantera is Tomaso's most popular model. Compared to the tiny figures of the Vallelunga and the modest production numbers of the Mangusta, the Pantera blew them both away, with 7,260 built up until 1991. The body of the Pantera was again designed by Ghia, with American Tom Chada taking the lead. Once more, Tomaso used Ford engines with the 351 V8 selected, producing 325 horsepower with a top speed of 159 miles per hour. This relationship with Ford was extended, as from late 1971, Ford began importing the Pantera to the US. This was sold through Lincoln Mercury dealers. More than 3/4 of the total production numbers were sold through this deal, until it ended in 1975. Tomaso opted to continue producing the car in smaller numbers after this point. Ford's involvement had helped to increase vehicle quality. After the first batches of Panteras arrived in the States, Ford became active participants in production, with precision stamping of body panels improving quality. The 1972 US car was modified with a lower compression ratio to meet emission standards, but it had the aggressive Cobra Jet camshaft fitted. In August of that year, the luxury Lusso Pantera L was introduced for the US, which featured a large black singular front bumper. It had a built-in airfoil to reduced front-end lift. This was exclusive for the US cars. Power was now up to 264 horsepower. In the spring of 1972, De Tomaso had introduced a GTS model in Europe. This was developed for Group 3 racing. It received a more powerful 345 horsepower engine that had larger Holley carburetors fitted. It also had wider wheels, ventilated disc brakes, and a more aggressive steering rack. This model sparked interest in the US, with a number appearing in the grey market. In the first half of 1974, a US GTS was introduced. This had similar features to the European version, but lacked the higher compression engine and wider wheels. Ford disengaged with De Tomaso in 1975, having sold around 5,500 cars. It continued to be sold in smaller batches, but with greater levels of performance for the rest of the world. Some versions, such as the Pantera America and Amerisport, were imported via grey market importers. After Ford discontinued the 351 Cleveland V8 in 1974, De Tomaso began sourcing the engine from Australia, where it continued to be produced until 1982. These Aussie engines were tuned in Switzerland up to 355 horsepower. The chassis were revised in 1980, the same year the GT5 model was introduced. This had bonded and riveted on fiberglass wheel arch extensions. Then in 1984, the GT5S model was offered, which had blended arches and a distinctive wide-body look. The GT5 and GT5S both had better brakes, more luxurious interiors, and larger wheels and tyres. Only around 197 GT5 and 183 GT5S Panteras were produced. The Australian 351 V8 continued to be used until all stock was exhausted in 1988. De Tomaso switched to using the Ford 351 Windsor engines after this point. For the 1990 Pantera 90 SI, the 351 was swapped out to Ford's 5-litre 302 engine, featuring electronic fuel injection and modified cylinder heads, intake manifolds, camshafts, valves and pistons. The Brembo brakes fitted were shared with the Ferrari F40. The body was restyled by Lamborghini Countach, Diablo and Miura designer Marcello Gandini. Only 41 90 SIs were made before the Pantera was phased out. The Pantera's successor was the Guara, the final car to be put to market by founder Alejandro De Tomaso. It was sold as a two-door Barchetta, Spider or Coupe, and was based on the Maserati Barchetta concept car prototype. Production switched to De Tomaso from Maserati after De Tomaso sold his stake in Maserati in 1993. He had held the majority of shares in the company and the Innocenti brand since 1976. Additionally, De Tomaso held the controlling stake in Moto Guzzi between 1973 and 2000. The Guara was built in very limited numbers until 2004. Just 52 were made. In June 2004, De Tomaso went into voluntary liquidation following the death of its founder in May 2003. The rights to the brand have been purchased a couple of times since, most notably in 2014. 5 years later, a retro-styled sports car prototype named the P72 was unveiled. It is inspired by the 1965 De Tomaso P70 racing car. Production of an expected 72 units was due to commence in December 2022. During the 1970s and 80s, outside of the Pantera's lineage, De Tomaso produced a small range of luxury cars. The 1971 Deauville was designed to compete with Jaguar and Mercedes-Benz. It was a four-door saloon paired with a Pantera engine, and its body was again designed by Tom Chada. 244 were built through to 1985. In 1972, a shortened Deauville chassis was used to create a coupe called the Longchamp, again paired to the Ford V8. The Grand Tourer was built as a two-door coupe or convertible. Its underpinnings were used by the Maserati Kyalami, and between it and the Deauville, the Quattroporte 3. Up to 1989, 409 Longchamps were made. Now here you'll see my wheels and tyres are just too small for this casting, so sadly I've had to swap them out to a set of larger Greenlight wheels. Still, I think they look okay, but that's just an unfortunate side effect of this casting using comedy chunky wheels. Again, it's been another episode where I've had little chance to talk about my work for all of the car's history. I was originally going to leave the louvres black like the interior, but after inspecting a heap of photos, I decided at the last minute to paint it in the body colour as the real car had. Ignore the masking tape on the yellow car's chassis, that's keeping some pieces in place to help lower the ride height. Throughout this build, I thought to myself how much more I would prefer the custom come the end result. But you know what? I think the restored car stands out better with those authentic decals, and just how well it's cleaned up in general. The blue on white is a great colour combo. Now they're both back together, ready for the final reveal. So here they are then, my pair of Matchbox 8G Tomaso Panteras. Both models have had a hard life. Little was left of the decals on either, and one had a bit of a stoved-in roof. My goal was to always restore one faithfully and customise the other. Sadly, the massive wheels of the original casting made customising in that department really quite difficult. But I've picked out all of the detailing in what is otherwise a very cool casting. Here first is my custom yellow Pantera, utilising the Greenlight wheels, but subtly detailed with Citadel and a wide selection of paint pens. Then here is the restored model, back in familiar shades of blue and white, and some exceptional decals. I'll pop a link to the source in the description. My favourite part of my custom is the rear light clusters and California license plate. There's so much detail there completely glossed over with the stock offering. But I'm pretty happy with both of these jobs in all. Leave a comment below to vote for your favourite of the two. I'm slightly leaning towards the restored car. If you haven't yet, please subscribe and leave the video a like if you enjoyed it on this double header. Thanks as ever to my Patreon and YouTube members. If you'd like previews of my next builds and your name in the credits, please join up to help support the channel. Links are again below. But that just leaves me to say thanks for watching, and I'll see you again for the next one. Bye for now.